Welcome to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries!
Welcome back to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries. Tonight, we enter a city where the dead do not need to rise from their graves, because in York, they were never fully buried. They are in the stonework, in the cellars, in the crooked lanes, in the cold breath beneath the minster, and in the quiet corners where history has been polished for tourists, but not forgiven by memory. York is often called one of the most haunted cities in Europe, but the real question is not whether ghosts walk there. The real question is why so many stories of the dead seem to gather in one place, as if the city itself has become a lantern for everything England tried to forget. York is not haunted simply because it is old. Many cities are old. York is haunted because its past lies close to the surface, almost indecently close, as though the centuries were stacked too thinly, and the living keep, stepping through them by accident. Walk a little way through its center, and you do not feel history as something distant, arranged safely behind glass. You feel it pressing inward from every side. Roman stone beneath medieval walls, Viking streets beneath modern shops, churches standing where older buildings once stood, cellars below townhouses, bones beneath gardens, names that have changed again and again, while the ground itself has remained stubbornly awake. The Romans called it Iberacum. To them, it was not a quaint northern city with tea rooms and ghost tours, but a frontier stronghold at the edge of empire. Soldiers marched through its gates. Officials administered power from within its walls. Emperors came north and died there. The city was made of command, discipline, and military necessity. That matters, because ghost stories often grow where human life has been forced into hard shapes. A garrison town is never just a place where people live. It is a place where orders are given, where fear is managed, where men far from home become part of a machine larger than themselves. When later generations imagined Roman soldiers still walking through York, it was not random decoration. It was memory choosing a uniform. One of York's most famous hauntings belongs to Treasurer's House, near York Minster. The story tells of Roman soldiers seen beneath the building, not proudly marching across a road, but passing through the cellar at an impossible level, as though their feet belonged to a buried street below the modern floor. That detail is what gives the tale its power. The ghost does not obey the present building. It obeys an older York. It moves through the city that was, not the city that is. Whether one believes the sighting or not, the image is almost perfect, the past continuing on its own route, indifferent to plaster, pipes, furniture, and disbelief. Then came the Anglian city, and then the Vikings. York became Jorvik, a trading settlement of workshops, markets, river routes, craft, dirt, smoke, and crowded life. The Viking past in York is often sold today with helmets, festivals, and reconstructed streets. But beneath the romance is something more intimate and unsettling. Archaeology has shown not only warriors and kings, but ordinary people, animal bones, timber buildings, evidence of meals cooked, goods traded, diseases endured, children raised. That kind of past haunts differently, not with one dramatic scream, but with the quiet knowledge that thousands lived under your feet and vanished into soil so thoroughly that only fragments speak for them now. York's haunted reputation also comes from the way the city refuses to give you clean historical lines. It does not let one age end neatly before another begins. The Roman fortress did not simply disappear. Its stones, roots, and memories shaped what followed. The Viking city did not vanish when Norman power arrived. The medieval city rose around what came before it, using, burying, breaking, and preserving by accident. This is one reason York feels so uncanny. It is not a museum of separate rooms. It is a palimpsest, a manuscript written over again and again, where the old words still bleed through. The medieval city brought faith, trade, wealth, and beauty. It also brought cruelty, disease, punishment, and terror. York Minster dominates the skyline with such confidence that it almost seems beyond fear. Yet even the Minster carries the marks of disaster. In 1984, fire tore through part of the cathedral after lightning struck the roof. Modern York watched one of its great sacred buildings burn, and for many people that night became part of the city's living memory. It was not medieval. It was not legend. It happened in living recall, with alarms, firefighters, smoke, water, and the terrible thought that something ancient might be lost in a single night. A city becomes haunted not only by old deaths, but by near losses. And then there is Clifford's Tower. Some places in a haunted city can be approached as entertainment. Clifford's Tower cannot. In 1190, York's Jewish community took refuge in the royal castle during a wave of anti-Jewish violence. Surrounded by a mob, many died there, some by their own hands rather than face murder or forced baptism. It remains one of the darkest events in medieval English history. If York is haunted, this is one of the reasons. Not because tragedy automatically becomes ghost story, but because atrocity creates a moral wound. The place stands high over the city, visible, visited, photographed, and yet beneath the tourist gaze is something extremely difficult. The memory of neighbors turning on neighbors, of fear becoming public, of an entire community trapped by hatred. This is where haunted history becomes more than entertainment. A ghost story can sometimes be a disguised confession. It allows a city to admit what civic pride cannot easily say aloud. York is beautiful, yes. York is charming, yes. But York has also been a place of violence, execution, exclusion, imprisonment, and plague. The dead in these stories are not only figures in white drifting down corridors. They are the people pushed to the edge of the record. Prisoners, servants, the condemned, the poor, the unnamed sick, those who left no grand memorial but remained somehow in the atmosphere. The Shambles is now one of York's most photographed streets, its leaning timber buildings almost too picturesque to be real. But its history was not made of magic shops and smiling visitors. It was once associated with butchers, meat stalls, slaughter, blood, offal, and the practical ugliness of feeding a crowded medieval city. The overhanging buildings, the narrowness, the shaded street, the gutters, all of it belonged to a world where death was not hidden away in sealed factories and supermarket packaging. Death had a smell. It had a trade. It ran down the street when it rained. It is not hard to understand why a place like that gathers stories. Modern eyes see charm. Older stones remember knives. York Castle Prison adds another layer. Here were cells, trials, punishments, and the machinery of law when law could be brutal, uneven, and intimate. Dick Turpin, now remembered as a romantic highwayman, was tried and executed in York, though the legend built around him is far cleaner than the real man. That gap between legend and reality is another kind of haunting. The city does not merely preserve the dead, it transforms them. Criminals become characters. Prisons become exhibitions. Execution sites become stops on walking tours. The past is made safe enough to visit, but never safe enough to silence completely. This is why York's ghost stories feel so persistent. They do not come from one ruined abbey or one tragic house. They come from density. York is haunted by accumulation. Every generation added another layer of fear. Roman soldiers, Viking settlers, Norman power, medieval merchants, persecuted communities, plague victims, prisoners, priests, rebels, servants, soldiers, firefighters, tourists, guides with lanterns, children pressing their faces to sweet shop windows where butchers once worked. The city has had too many lives to behave like one place. There is also the matter of architecture. York is made for haunting. Its lanes narrow unexpectedly. Its snickelways twist away from the light. Its walls let you look down into streets as though watching time from above. Its old buildings lean close, creating pockets of shadow even in daylight. At night, the city changes quickly. A cheerful street can become a corridor. A churchyard can appear at the edge of vision. A pub window glows like something alive. Footsteps echo in places where you cannot immediately see who is walking. In a modern city built from glass, ghosts struggle to find corners. York gives them doorways. But perhaps the deepest reason York feels haunted is psychological. The city offers constant evidence that people before us were real, busy, frightened, hopeful, and temporary. That is uncomfortable. A Roman soldier was once as present in his own body as we are in ours. A Viking craft worker once worried about work, weather, money, hunger, family. A medieval mother once crossed a lane carrying bread, never imagining that centuries later, strangers would pay to hear stories about the dead around her street. York compresses that knowledge. It makes mortality architectural. You cannot walk far without being reminded that life becomes history very quickly. So when people ask why York is so haunted, the simple answer is that it has endured too much and preserved too much. But the better answer is this: York is haunted because it remembers in layers. It remembers empire and invasion, prayer and punishment, trade and slaughter, beauty and terror. It remembers the famous and the forgotten. It remembers what was built, what burned, what was buried, and what was never properly answered for. Maybe the ghosts of York are not proof that the dead return. Maybe they are proof that the past does not leave when we stop looking at it. It waits in the foundations. It waits under the floorboards. It waits behind the stories polished smooth for visitors. And when the streets grow quiet, when the minster darkens against the sky, when the last footsteps fade from the Shambles and the river moves black beneath the bridges, York seems to breathe with all its centuries at once. That is why the city feels haunted. Not because it belongs to the dead, but because the living have never managed to own it completely. And if this journey into York's shadows kept you listening, subscribe to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries, where history does not sleep easily, and the oldest stories are usually the ones still watching from the dark.